Return of the Mac. Once again, return of the Mac. I think that Norfolk State, Prairie View A&M could have some of you singing that song. And I'm talking about the return of Fred McNair. Oh, yeah. It's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com to get started. And if you're new to FanDuel, you get $150 back in bonus bets if you put down a $5 bet that wins. Go to FanDuel.com and make every moment more. You know the drill with the HBCU circuit, but we're going to alter things just a tad bit today. So we're going to kick it off with the SWAC West, then we're going to get into the MEAC, wrap it up with the SWAC East, but I'm going to change things, and I'm going to take a MEAC team and put them in the first segment because Norfolk State, just like Prairie View A&M, has made the decision to walk away from their head coach. It's a little bit different, but I think that both jobs being open immediately made me think about Fred McNair. And as you heard my beautiful crooning, my beautiful vocals at the beginning of the episode, I know you just thought I sang when it said play my music, but I can also hit you with a little return of the Mac. Once again, we're talking about Fred McNair, the former Alcorn State head coach, the current Southern Jaguars tight ends coach. No, getting his next job isn't currently on his mind, but it's not in the back of his mind either. It's not that far from his forefront, that's not that far from the forefront of his thought process, if you ask me. So with Prairie View A&M, who replaces Bubba McDowell, I think that the Panthers kickstarted the most interesting, at least the early candidate for the most interesting offseason storyline in HBCU football. Many people have opinions on whether or not Bubba McDowell should have been moved on from. Mind you, he was just not extended as opposed to being fired like Dawson Odums was. But I think people have a lot of opinions on whether or not this was the right call. I would be interested to see if they make a call to Fred McNair. We know that McNair was connected to Texas Southern just this past offseason. It didn't happen for whatever reason. I wonder if PV will be hungry for this huge name. We want this former player. I'd be interested if they're excited or thirsty to go that way. But Fred McNair is already in that Houston area or interested in that Houston area. So I think some of the selling points that TSU used, PV could still use, and it would appeal to McNair. So I think that Prairie View job is something that's really interesting. And then we would definitely get to see him versus Alcorn because they're two SWAC West opponents. Then let's look at Norfolk State. I know that they are not in the SWAC West. However, they fired Dawson Odums today. I don't think this was that much of a surprise. I did hear some people think that they thought he would see the end of his contract, but there was not much satisfaction. That's the difference between Bubba McDowell. And also, let me say this. I read an article, also KT Mosley was the same one, and I just didn't bring up this point, that Bubba did mention feeling some of the pressure. So maybe he knew that his job was on the line. This is how I kind of look at Bubba McDowell, and then we'll get right back to Norfolk State. Bubba McDowell feels like the guy who was on his contract year and did not perform. Because if you know your contract expires this year, you have a new athletic director. They're probably grading him pretty harshly. There's no benefit of the doubt. There's no we like you, Bubba. In that contract year, he had his worst season. So if you're in your contract year with your worst season, you're not maximizing your value. And when you don't maximize your value, people decide to let you walk in free agency. In this case, drop the analogy, he didn't have a good year. Bubba McDowell in the last year of his contract had the worst year that he's had at PV in the last 3 years, right? They decided they don't want to be around him anymore. We think we could do better. That's what the decision was. That's how I kind of rationalize it. But back to Norfolk State, man, I heard this chatter about Dawson Odums last year. So it's not a surprise to me. I think the only surprise is that some people thought he would be able to live out his contract, and they cut him a year before the contract was up. That's probably the only part that's a surprise. But this is another head coaching vacancy. And I don't think it's a terrible job. They had talent on that team. You would have to go through and you would have to see how much of that talent is returning, how much of that talent is going to hit the portal, because we're only in late November. So we're right here on portal season. But you got to understand how many of those guys are going to hit the portal. How many of those guys graduate? How many of those guys are juniors, right? Things like that, to where, okay, I can build with this player for at least 2 seasons. That, in my opinion, is a very interesting job. I'm not saying it's the most attractive job. I would have to go through and look at that roster, but there was talent on this team, 100%. So, it won't be bare. It won't be bare. But let's keep it pushing in the SWAC West. As for Texas Southern, I'm so happy that Chris Dishman was able to get a 500 season in his first year, because, as I've mentioned on multiple occasions, the context of situation fade away. Your win over PV will live on forever. That will stand the test of time. But beyond that, the game to Southern, the game to UAPB, those things fade. Your record is all that you're judged by. And when you go 4-4 in conference play, it's not a losing record. I know it's not a winning record, and I wish some things bounced differently, but they didn't. But it's not a losing record. And I do believe that there's some value to that when you're around a team that is used to failing. This feels like a really good starting point for Chris Dishman. So I'm happy. As an alum, I'm satisfied. I can rock with this. UAPB. I didn't like that Javonnie Gibson wasn't force-fed, right? Only 4 catches. I'd have made sure he got 10. You see Eastern Washington, they was feeding that boy like Cooper Kupp was getting fed by Matthew Stafford. And that's before Puka Nacua, right? Like, y'all remember do you remember how much that Matthew Stafford was feeding Cooper Kupp prior to getting Puka Nacua? Oh my God, it was ridiculous. They were feeding that boy. And I'm not just talking about Kupp. I'm talking about Chisholm, who ended up being the leading receiver in FCS football. Gibson was number 2. Best deep threat in the country. He entered the transfer portal. That's no surprise. I think that a first-team All-American is probably in his future this year. This is the type of season when players hit the portal, especially when you're talking about UAPB, who didn't have a lot of team success. I can't blame him. I can't blame him at all. Then you go to Alcorn. Yeah, let's go into Alcorn now. The Braves were ending the season on a good note. They beat PV. Right? Like they were looking good. Who was their last game? I can't remember. They won 2 games in a row, and then they ran into Jackson State. And Jackson State absolutely hit them with a buzzsaw. Jackson State came through and beat them badly. If you're looking on a positive note, Jacorian Sewell still had himself an explosive run of 82 yards. That really carried his production for the day. But you had another 100-yard game. He's been pretty solid as far as yards per carry. It may not be a play-by-play. Maybe you get a boom here. But he's been pretty solid. He's averaged at least 4 yards per carry in every game since that McNeese game. That was a game where this streak started, except for one. So he's been pretty consistent, in my opinion. And then as for Southern and Grambling, I was trying to look forward to the SWAC championship game. But Southern and Grambling are going to be our game of the week this week. But we also have to look at the FCS playoffs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the storylines right now, one for Grambling, one for Southern, and we'll kick it off with the Jaguars. This is Terrence Gray's first one as a coach, for real, like a low pressure. This is the lowest pressure that Terrence Gray has been under going into a Bayou Classic. He was the interim head coach. I don't know if you view that as low pressure, but you're trying to get that job, and he got it this time. Now he has a little bit more of a security blanket. That's probably the better way to say it. The stakes aren't lower, but the security blanket does exist. That's one that's a little bit interesting to me, but the one that really gets me. Also, shout out to Kelby Givens, because he's a finalist for the Buck Buchanan Award for the best FCS player in in FCS football. So I think it's kind of safe to assume. It's kind of safe to assume, because I didn't see Traquan Thomas on that list. I didn't see Joshua Nobles on that list. I did see Andrew Jones on that list, and I think it's safe to say Andrew Jones, if they vote the same way, Jones is going to be your player of the year, defensive player of the year. But anyway, to Grambling. This is Mickey Joseph's first Bayou Classic, but he's from the city. So you don't have to tell him the importance of the Bayou Classic. Some people have to get in and you have to interact with it. This is his first one as a head coach. But him being from New Orleans, I highly doubt that this is Mickey Joseph's first Bayou Classic that he'll ever be in attendance of. It's just the first one where he's the head coach of it. There was a statement made earlier this offseason that had absolutely nothing to do with the Bayou Classic, but I think is extremely applicable. Mickey Joseph made a comment. He said, Louisiana is my state and New Orleans is my town. I loved it when he said that. I loved it. I still think that should be a t-shirt. But if Louisiana is your state and New Orleans is your town, you have to defeat the other Louisiana top-notch HBCU in the city of New Orleans, in the biggest game of the year, especially when there's nothing else for you to play for other than this. Mickey Joseph wins this game, I might go get a shirt that says Louisiana is my state and New Orleans is my town. And I'm going to sell them for, I ain't going to tell you how much. Y'all might try to steal my idea. But this is going to be good. This is going to be good. With Tennessee State being an extra here, we're going to move them to the MEAC. So we swapped Norfolk State and Tennessee State. All right, let's move into the MEAC and we'll get into the Tigers and the rest of the teams. Matter of fact, I got something to say when we come back. That's going to be funny. I'm going to save it for the MEAC segment, though. And we're going to do that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, FanDuel is trying to give you $150 back in bonus bets. They want you to win it. They want you to get it. They're eager. They're telling you, hey, tell your friend they ain't on FanDuel yet. Come on over here. And here's the thing. All you have to do is get a $5 bet, low risk, high reward, and get it right. Right? So you have the Chiefs versus the Raiders on Friday for your Black Friday game. You have the Lions, the Cowboys. You have the typical Thanksgiving games. Put some money down. Make some money while you're sitting at the table. It's on you. It's on you, baby. That's what you got to do. So go ahead and go to FanDuel.com. Make every moment more. Get $150 back in bonus bets when you put down a winning $5 bet on the NBA or the NHL or the NFL or soccer or anything. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com, put some money down on any of those sports, and collect your earnings. Go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day. Make your second listen, Locked On Longhorns. Jonathan Davis is breaking down phenomenally, might I add. He's breaking down all of the biggest storylines around the UT Longhorns, including who they'll be facing in the SEC championship game, because I think they punched their ticket already, if I'm not mistaken. But let's get into the MEAC and kick it off with Tennessee State, because I know technically they're not there. But what was making me laugh is I was on Twitter today. Twitter will never die. But I was on Twitter today, and there was a clip that was cut up from HBCU Nightly where Joshua was talking about, hey, Tennessee State, come on to the MEAC. Well, Josh, I can't put TSU in the MEAC, but what I can do is I can put Tennessee State with the MEAC today. And this is for you. This is for you like LeBron did it for Cleveland. Tennessee State has the Coach of the Year in the Big South OVC. Eddie George has been awarded with that honor. He's also a finalist for the Eddie Robinson Coach of the Year in the FCS ranks, right? You've seen a really strong year, and everybody is acknowledging what it is that Eddie George has done. I also want to look at Draylon Ellis, because I said I was going to come in here, I was going to preview or look at what Draylon Ellis was able to do as far as rankings all time in TSU passing yards. Draylon Ellis entered last week, the last game of the season, 9th in TSU history. He was the 9th leading passer all time career-wise in that school's history. Then he had 232 yards. So now he's moved up the ranks and he's at 7th. I think that he could get to 6th. He could get to 6th if they win this game. I don't know if he throws for a little under 400. Excuse me. I don't know if he throws for a little under 400, and that's what he would need to do. He's not that close, but he's not that far. 2 games should definitely get it for him, And if he's just absolutely rattling off pass after pass against Montana, that will be that may lead to him getting that and moving up to 6th spot. I don't think he gets to 5th though. That's gonna be tough. That's a lot of yards. You would have to go deep into the playoffs. But shout out to them. They got Montana late. I'm gonna make sure I sleep in the night before or take me a nap. I'm an old man, y'all. I ain't gonna lie to you. That Saturday, I'm gonna need my rest before we go to 9:15 Central Time to play Montana. Whew. Anywho, let's keep it rolling with the MEAC. North Carolina Central. What's happening, Joshua Jones? I see what you got going on. All right, this game meant nothing. This game meant absolutely nothing. So what do? You pull out the freshman quarterback and say, get your reps, young fella. And he looked good. Very, very concise, very efficient. He had 4 touchdowns, 3 on the ground, 1 through the air. But I thought that he really paired himself well. You're looking at 11 of 15, 199 yards, a touchdown, 3 more added on the ground. You like that. He stole the show. And I'm not trying to spin no kind of quarterback controversy. Whatever they do with their quarterback is what they do with their quarterback. I'm just saying that Joshua Jones, the redshirt freshman, looked like he's got something. And Walker Harris has looked like he's had something before too. And you know who's in front of him? Davius Richard. They have shown that they're okay telling your young quarterback to sit. We could get Joshua Jones in the mix as a junior. Okay. Stay with the program. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. As to South Carolina State, as I said yesterday, foot on the gas. But you have Stubblefield because Eric Phoenix was still out, and they still ran it up on him. Stubblefield had 4 touchdowns evenly split between the air and the ground. So you had 2 touchdowns passing, 2 touchdowns rushing. And then KZ Adams came in and he added 3 touchdowns as well. And that's like, when you're really looking at it, when you're really thinking about it, when your leader of your offense goes down, somebody's got to step up. It could be those great wide receivers. It could be the running game. It could be the defense. But everybody, South Carolina State showed why they're the best team in this conference. They showed that. Now to Norfolk State, to Delaware State. Another week, another blowout. There's not really too much for me to dive in and say. It's nothing special here. They just keep getting whipped. And that's disappointing. I would say that North Carolina Central, they do have a great offense and a great defense. But I can't excuse them for that because this is more of the same. It'd be one thing if, I never seen them get done like this. I seen them get done like this last week and the week before and the week before and the week before. You run the ball well, but you ain't getting nothing going through the air. Nothing. As for Morgan State, they held on against the Bison. They held on against the Bison because Howard tried to make a late comeback. They did. They tried to make a late comeback where we're going to score 2 touchdowns. Now we're going to get a little closer. We're going to score a touchdown. And then after that, we're going to get an onside kick. And then it was a close matchup late. I think the coach, the score looked a certain kind of way. But Morgan State had a lot of control in this game, I would say, in my opinion, at least, especially late. There were some late touchdowns that kind of distorted it. But shout out to them for holding on. Also, speaking of Buck Buchanan Award finalist, Elijah Williams, the Beast. The undisputed king within that conference. We'll see, because Kenny Gallup made some really big plays too, like just throughout the season. I think that he was always a constant presence. We'll see if he's able to get that two-peat, if he's able to get that Defensive Player of the Year again. But Elijah Williams has been a beast. He has been a beast. And I'm not mistaken, I think he did end up getting double-digit sacks. And I'll look at that as we keep rolling. But let's get into Howard. Let's get into Howard right now because, there you go, league high. A league high, 19 tackles for loss, only 9 sacks. I thought he was at 9.5. Anyway, so as we get into Howard, I'm actually quite disgusted with Howard. Ironically enough, I'm actually quite disgusted with the way that Howard. No, this 11. No, that was 2022. Anyway, He had 11 sacks. So you had a career high in sacks this year and 15 tackles for a loss. He was a very disruptive player, Elijah Williams. As to Howard, I'm very disgusted. I'm absolutely disgusted with what it is that Howard did in that run game. And to be fair, Morgan State was clamping the run game up. But 7 carries for Eden James. He only had 8 yards. So, once again, great job to the Morgan State defense. 5 carries for Jared Hunter. He only had like 12 yards. Once again, kudos to that Morgan State defense. But Jared Hunter and Eden James combined for 12 carries. I want them to have 12 carries apiece. You weren't getting blown out the entirety of the game. You weren't getting blown out the entirety of the game, and that's kind of disappointing to me because you had an opportunity to run the ball early, and instead you took 2 of your best weapons and ran them 12 combined times. That is a recipe for failure, and that's what you keep cooking up because you keep using that recipe every time. If the recipe isn't working, stop going to the recipe. It's not hard. Find something else to cook. I hated that, man. I just feel like you wasted Jared Hunter at times. He has 755 yards, but think about if he was made a focal point, what he could have been. Think about if Eden James was made a focal point, what he could have done. 12 carries amongst the 2 of them, in my opinion, is absolutely terrible. Now for I'll do North Carolina A&T because I hate ending with the Aggies. But North Carolina A&T, there's probably not a team more excited for the season to be over than the Aggies. Just honest and truthfully, there hasn't been a point where you felt optimism. There hasn't been a point where you felt hope. I can't even come in and fake it. I'm just glad that the season is over for them. As for Hampton, I'm kind of glad their season is over too because it's a lot of close losses, and that's gut wrenching. That hurts. That takes some pain out. I ain't even gonna sit here and lie to you. To lose that close on a repeated basis is different. And this time I felt like the Pirates let the game slip between their fingers. This time I felt like Hampton didn't have to claw back. They were up. They were up 28-7. And then it happened. Then they just crippled. From there, it was 28-7, and they just started getting ate up. Then you get to the fourth quarter, and Albany scores 24 points in the fourth quarter. First score comes off of a pick six. So now you're putting points on the board for them, essentially. You get 2 points from a blocked extra point that get returned for a touchdown. At that point, you sitting there like, it ain't my day. It ain't my day. And that's what it felt like. But it hasn't been their day often. Too many times in the CAA, they lost close games. They lost close games. And that was the problem. This happened yet again. Another close game, another loss for Hampton. But let's move forward to a couple of teams in the SWAC East, starting off with Jackson State because they closed out really strong over Alcorn. Really strong over Alcorn. And I want to break down the fact that, hey, this is an explosive offense, and they showcased it a couple of times in the final game of the season as we continue with Locked On HBCU. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Jackson State kept their foot on the gas. I have to give them that. I gave that credit to them on yesterday's episode, and I want to point out one thing. They are easily the most explosive offense in the conference. They're the best scoring offense. They've done everything. They had a 50-something yard touchdown and a 40-something yard touchdown, both through the air. This is a dangerous offense because you know that they can move the ball down the field methodically, and you know they can get one-play touchdowns. They had a 57-yard touchdown throw and a 44-yard touchdown throw. And it was the 2 touchdowns that Jacoby and Morgan threw for. This is going to be such a, oh my God, this is going to be such a tough team to stop. It's a tough team to stop. So I can't wait to see if anybody is able to do it. That should be a fun challenge. As for Bama State, this is Bama State football. 9-6 over Prairie View A&M. Eddie Robinson out of field bag getting his old teammate fired, man. I'm just kidding. Just kidding, coach. Both coaches. I want y'all both on the show. Eddie Robinson again, Bubba McDaniel. Bubba McDowell for the first time, please. but he got you out of here. But no, this is Bama State football. I got distracted with the things that Kareem Key was doing. I was like, oh, yeah, look at this young quarterback who used to play wide receiver. He's being efficient. Look at how he's leading wide receivers on first down and second down. Look at how he's making the big plays. Look at this bomb that he just threw on third and medium. Oh, he's making it. That man threw 9 passes a week ago against Jackson State. He threw 14 passes this week. Over the last 2 weeks combined, he's completed 9 passes. Kinsey, on the other hand, at running back, he has been running the rock. Over 100 yards last week against JSU. I thought he was really good against them. Almost 100 this week. This is Bama State football. 9-6, grind it out, ground and pound like Randy Couture, right? Like we're gonna ground you with the offense and we're gonna pound you with the defense. This is real old school UFC type game planning. Run the football, play defense. We're gonna run it up and just win with field goals. I feel like somebody got to be wearing a neck pad out there, man. In all seriousness, this is not how they want to win football games, but it does feel really in line with everything about them, though. Alabama A&M, or excuse me, let's start with Valley. I was interested to see how does Valley respond to the upset over FAMU, because that's a huge victory for them. How do you respond? I wish that was the last game of the season for them, but it wasn't. No need to wish past that. It's not my birthday, even if it was. I done told you what my wish was, so obviously it can't come true. When you're looking at Mississippi Valley State, they came out and put 28 points on the board in the first half. Things slowed down in the second, but for you to put 28 points on the board in the first half, I was proud of them. I really was. I give Mississippi Valley State so much crap. I give them so much crap. I got to give them credit when credit is due. It was an honorable. I didn't think he was gonna win. I'll just be honest with you. Like I was thinking, yeah, they're not gonna follow this up. But it was honorable. You put points on the board. Now to the team that beat Valley was Alabama A&M, and they did that in the third quarter. What's always fascinating to me is when you have moments like just time spans that are so good, and you reflect on them. Like, oh, look at all the great things that happen, and they start off with a terrible event. But everything that followed was so exciting, was so blessed that we don't even act like it happened. Alabama A&M threw an interception 3 plays into the second half, excuse me. Then the rest of the third quarter, boom, 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 boom. Just hitting them. And you'd have put up 21 points. You scored 3 touchdowns in a row. 3 Cornelius Brown touchdown passes. So things figured out. They figured some things out. As for the last 2 that we're going to look at, FAMU and Bethune-Cookman, I'll say this once again when it comes to the Rattlers. Make sure I got all the teams. When it comes to the Rattlers, they ran the football. FAMU ran the football, and that is a huge difference. I can't wait to watch A&M. Well, I guess they're both A&Ms. FAMU versus Alabama A&M, because I want to see if FAMU approaches with the same style of offense. I want to see if FAMU approaches and say we're going to run the football. Thad Franklin ran 26 times. I have to go back to his last 4 games combined to get to 26 carries. I'm looking at Kelvin Dean, one of the guys that's a little bit more frustrating for me with how he's being used. I really feel like he's more explosive to get the little amount of touches that he gets. These guys had the most productive and the most utilized run game by FAMU this year. The second most productive and utilized run game led to 52 points. This one led to 41. Is it a coincidence? I don't know. Will we find out on Friday when they play Alabama A&M? I don't know. I hope we do, because I want to see if they're able to run the football. I want to see if they stay consistent to it, and I want to see if it leads to the same types of results. The only 2 times that FAMU has scored more than 30 points this year is when they ran the ball more than 30 times. More than 35 times, I should even say, to be more specific. Then for Bethune-Cookman, hey, FAMU wasn't the only one running in this game. FAMU is not the only team that was running in this game. You have Bethune-Cookman, and I want to look at this because they had a couple of funny little stats. So first off, Dennis Palmer had 37 touches. Golly, they believed in running ball that day too. He had 3 touchdowns, 178 yards. So he had a really good game. for Dennis Palmer. But here goes one stat that's interesting. So you had a Darnell D's 37-yard trick play touchdown, or excuse me, trick play pass, 233 yards total through the air. Malik Huggins had 177 yards of that 233. And he did catch that 37-yard pass from Higgins, or from D's. There's no other player who had 37 yards. Kobe Stewart, 2 for 21. Thomas Nance, 1 for 21. Marcus Velez, 1 for 6. Javon Ross, 1 for 5. Malik Huggins had probably 3/4 of that offense through the air. I just want to shout that out. Shout out to Malik. And shout out to you as well. Tomorrow we'll be back. We'll be looking at Grambling versus Southern, and we'll also look at the playoff games that we need to check out. So you make sure that you're tuning in for the matchups, and then not for the storylines, but the matchups and the key to victory, as well as the FCS playoff games and D2 playoff games. We'll have all of that and more. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.